Hey guys, welcome back. It has been a while. I have missed this. Let's continue with the task countdown app. So this is what we have created in the previous two videos. If you're new to my channel, you can check the other parts by tapping on the link above. In this tutorial, we'll create this timer view and add the logic and the animations to the track layers using CABasicAnimation. So let's get started. We'll create a new view controller and name it timer view controller. Let's do the basic setup and then we'll add the UI to the storyboard. Let's add a new view controller from the library. And we'll set the class and the identifier to timer view controller. We'll change the background color of the main view now and add the other subviews. Add a UI button, change the type to custom, and we'll use SF symbol for the image. We'll set the configuration and then apply the constraints. Top to 20, trailing to 24 and height and width to 48. Next we'll add a view as a container for the image view. Let's set a bottom constraint with respect to the button. Set the background color and apply the constraints, leading to 24, height and width to 56. Next we'll add an image view inside it. Set the height and width to 36 and align its center X and Y. Next we'll add a label for the task name. Align it vertically with respect to the image view. Set leading to 26. Set trailing to 48 and then we'll set the font property. We'll use a custom font and set it to Montserrat. Set the size to 22. Now we'll add a timer view to contain the timer tracks. We'll be adding in the timer tracks programmatically, but we still need a container for it. Clear the background. Align it vertically. Set the equal heights constraint. Set the leading and trailing constraint to 24 and we'll change the equal heights multiplied to 0.385. Let's move it upwards by 20 points. Next we'll add a view inside it for the timer label. Align center X and Y. Add proportional width constraint to 0.65. And we'll set the aspect ratio to 1:1. Let's change its background color. Now we'll add a label to show the current timer seconds. Make sure that it's inside the timer view. Add center X and Y constraint. Add a placeholder text. And change its font to Code Pro Bold. Next we'll add a view that acts as a container for the button. Set the background to white. Set top to 70. Center it horizontally with respect to the container. And width and height to 72. Add a button inside the view. We'll again set the properties similar to the close button. Set the top, leading, trailing and bottom constraint to 0. Next, we'll copy the whole view and paste it. Set center X and change the constant to -72 and set top to 70. We'll do the same thing one more time. Set the horizontal constant to 72 and top to 70. Now we'll change the left symbol to pause and the right symbol to reset. Finally, we'll add a label to show the task description. Set the second item to button.bottom and change the constant to 40, leading to 24, trailing to 48. And now we'll just set the color and the font. We are almost done with the storyboard. Now first we'll add the code to show our newly created view controller on the press of the start button. We'll use the storyboard's instantiate view controller function to get an instance of our newly created view controller. Now we'll call the compute seconds function of our view model that converts the hours and minutes into seconds and adds them together. We'll present this view controller instead of pushing it. Now let's run the app. We'll quickly fill in the details and tap on the start button. Okay, the basic views look good. Let's customize it and add the logic. Let's add the outlets for all the views in the storyboard. I'll speed this process a bit. Add a variable for the task view model. We'll pass it from the previous view controller. We'll use this view model to fetch the task. Add a variable to contain the total seconds. We'll use the didSet property observer to update the timer seconds. Add one more variable for the timer seconds. We'll update the timer whenever the total seconds is set. Let's add two attributed string properties. We'll use them later to update the timer label. We'll add two properties here, font and the color. We need two attributes because we'll use the default one for the whole label and we'll use the bold one for the time. Now we'll define the track layer and the fill layer for the timer. We'll use CA shape layer for this. CA shape layer provides hardware accelerated drawing of all sorts of 2D shapes. We also need one variable to contain the timer state. We defined it when we were creating our models. Let's initialize it to suspended. Add one more to contain the timer. That's it for the variables. Now we can start updating the UI. Set the total seconds from the task. And we'll set the task name. Okay, looks like we forgot to add an outlet for the label. Now we can set the task name and the description. We'll change the corner radius of the image container view to make it a circle. And we'll do the same for the image view. We'll set the image property of the image view by using the task type. If you remember the completed timer view, only the start button was visible by default and the other two were not. So let's hide the pause and the reset views. Let's use a for each loop and we'll unwrap the view using the guard statement. And once that's done, we'll set the layer opacity to 0 and user interaction to false. Let's use one more for each loop to change the corner radius of the buttons. Next, we need to apply some rotations on the timer view so that the timer track animation that we'll add starts from the top instead of its initial position. We'll use the transform property and use CZ-affine transform to rotate the views. We'll rotate the outer timer container by 270 degrees and the inner label and the view by 90 degrees. Now it's time to run the app and see what we have done so far. Let's add the details of the task quickly and tap on the start button. Oh, we forgot to pass the view model from the previous view controller. Let's fix it. Okay, time to run the app again and we'll quickly fill in the data. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting tired of this step. From next time onwards, we'll just use a placeholder task until we are ready. Cool, the base views are looking good. Let's continue. Let's set the tint color of the image to black. And we'll make this view controller as our initial view controller. We'll comment this line of code and add our own task. Yeah, this is much better and it will save a lot of time. Now we'll call the function to set up the track layers in the view will appear method. We'll use dispatch_main.async to call this function. Let's write a definition for this function next. First, we'll calculate the radius for the circle track. We'll use the smaller value between the width and the height of the timer view and divide it by 2. We'll use UI Bezier path to create the timer tracks. It contains lots of different initializers to create various shapes. We'll use the one which allows us to create a circle. We'll use CZ point to provide the arc center and pass height by 2 and width by 2 respectively. We'll pass our computed radius, set the start angle to 0 and the end angle to 360 degrees. With that done, now we can use the path property with the two layers that we have defined above. We'll pass our arc path as a CZ path. Now we can set the stroke color. Line width to 20. Pass the fill color as clear. And set the line cap to round. Oh, okay, I'll use UIKit instead of UI color. We'll copy these properties and use the same for the fill layer. Change the name of the layer to timer circle fill layer. And we'll just modify some of the properties. Let's add one more property for the fill layer, which is stroke end. The value of the stroke end goes from 0 to 1. Let's complete the function by adding these two layers to the timer view. And we'll also use the UI view animate method to change the inner timer view to a circle. Set the duration to 0.3, delay to 0, and the animation type to curve is in out. Alright, the track layers look good. Now we can add the functional pieces. We'll add two more lazy variables for CABasicAnimation. With this, we can add basic single keyframe animation capabilities to a layer. The animation property takes a key path. For this animation, we'll animate the stroke end property of the layers. We'll set the to value to 0, fill mode to forwards, removed on completion to true, and we'll return it. We'll copy the same for the reset animation and just change a few things. We'll set the final value and the duration to 1. And we'll set the remove on completion to false. Now let's add the outlet functions for the start, pause and reset buttons. Let's start with the close function. We'll remove both the layers from the super layer and call the dismiss function. Let's also put a check on the timer and invalidate it if it's not nil. Oh wait, we haven't declared our timer as an optional, so we can just call the invalidate function. Onwards to the start function. Add a guard statement to check if the timer state is suspended or we return. Set the duration for the timer animation to timer seconds. We'll animate the pause button with UI view transition. Set the duration to 0.3 and we'll use cross dissolve. Using SF symbol directly will result in a default image, and we'll need to use configuration to change the size and the weight. As we need to change the image of the pause button frequently, we'll make this as a generic function. Create a function called animate pause button and pass the name of the symbol as a parameter. Let's use this in the start button and we'll set the image to pause. We'll create another animation function to show the pause reset views, hide the start view and vice versa. We'll have an input parameter called timer playing and we'll pass false. Let's call the UI view animate method, set the duration to 0.3, delay to 0 and the animation type to curve ease in out. If the timer is playing, we'll set the opacity of the play view to 1, otherwise 0. And likewise we'll do the opposite for the pause and the reset views. 0 if it's true, otherwise 1. Let's use weak self in the completion block. And we'll call for each loop on pause and reset views to enable or disable the user interaction. We'll unwrap the view using a guard statement and then set the user interaction property. Okay, let's run the app and see how it looks. Cool, so the views are getting animated. Now we'll add the logic to start the timer and update the label. Let's name the function as start timer. We'll create the update label function shortly. We'll initialize the timer, set the time interval to 1 second, and we'll assign it to our variable. We'll reduce the timer seconds by 1 and call update label. We'll add update label to the top and define this function now. First we'll compute the seconds, minutes and hours from the timer. We'll need to use an if-else condition to update the label based on whether we need to show hours or not. Get the string count for hours, minutes and seconds. And then create the time string. We'll use this with our NS mutable attributed string. Pass the string and the default attributes. Now's the fun part. We'll apply bold attributes based on the time values and use NS range with the string counts. We'll use add attributes 2 more times for minutes and seconds. We'll set the start location to hours count plus 2 and the length to minutes count. Follow the same pattern for seconds as well. And finally we'll apply this attributed string to our label. Copy the code starting from minutes and paste it into the else block. Let's update our time string and remove hours from it. Set the location to minutes count plus 3 And we'll add append zeros to the seconds count. Let's add append zeros to the seconds variable in the if part as well. We'll see what happens. We'll call the reset function when the timer seconds is equal to 0. Let's set the timer state to running. And we'll add our fill animation to our fill layer. You can pass any string. Let's write the reset function now. We'll invalidate the timer and remove all the animations. Let's run the app now and we'll start the timer. Looks like we forgot to add a space in the timer string. We'll quickly go back to our code and add it. Alright, good job so far guys. It's time to work on the pause and the reset functionality. We'll add a switch case to detect the running and the pause state. We won't be using suspended here, so we can remove it and just use our default. Set the timer state variable to paused. We'll compute the new stroke end value. Divide the timer seconds by the total seconds. Reset the timer and call the animate pause button function. Here we'll set the timer state to running. And we'll update the duration of the timer fill animation with the current timer seconds. We'll call the start timer and the animate pause button function. And we'll pass the symbol as pause.fill. It's time to run the app. So the pause and resume are working fine. We are one step closer to the end. Let's finish the reset function. We'll change the timer state to suspended. Reassign the timer seconds. Call the reset timer function. We'll add the reset animation to our fill layer. And we'll also reset the start, pause and resume views. We'll run the app and see if there is anything that we've missed. Okay, we need to call the update label in the reset function as well. Alright, we're almost there and most of the functional pieces are ready. We'll add one more function to add some circles to the UI. We'll use the shape layer and the bezier part to do that. We'll use CZ point to place the circles at the bottom left of the screen. Modify the fill color and the opacity. Create a copy and we'll modify some of the properties. We'll insert both of them below the views layer. We also need to bring the description label to the front. Let's see what happens if we don't first. And finally we'll call the update label and the add circles in the viewDidLoad method. As you can see, the description is behind the circle and its color has faded. Let's bring it to the front, and while we are at it, let's also reduce the radius of the circle and shift it downwards. Yeah, this is much better. Now we can remove the placeholder task and set the initial view controller back to the new task view controller. Now it's time to run the app and see if everything is working as expected. We'll fill the task details. Set the timer to 2 minutes and press the start button. Alright, it looks good. So I don't think we have anything major left to do. The only thing that I can think of is to check what happens when the timer ends. Clear the minutes text field and we'll provide 5 seconds. Aha, so the timer is not getting reset properly. Let's go back to our code and fix it. Let's reassign the total seconds to the timer seconds. We also need to invalidate the local timer, hide the pause and the reset views, and we'll set the timer state back to suspended. With that, everything has been taken care of and we have reached the end of the tutorial. You can add a lot of customizations and new features to the project, and I'll let you guys tinker with it. What would you like to see next? Another UIKit project or something in Swift UI? Let me know in the comments below. Hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe to my channel to stay updated. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.